am Ben Leonard. I would like to welcome everyone to the regular board meeting of the St. Peter's School Board. It is Monday, October 19th, 2020. We are in the governor's room of the Community Center on 600 South 5th Street in St. Peter. It is roughly 6:30. I would like to call this meeting to order. I would like, well, before we dive into adopting the agenda, let's rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. I would accept a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda is adopted. We would consider a request to speak on the agenda. I don't know if anyone is online. There is no one here in the governor's room. But if anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, they should let us know. With that, we will move on to the approval of consent agenda items. I did receive a text from Treasurer Carlson who said that he would be a few minutes late, so he will arrive, and he said he did review the bills this morning and they were all in good order. I don't know if anyone has a specific agenda item that they would like to call out or hold, or if we have. Before I call a motion, I just want to point out that item E is a $2,500 donation from Nicollet County for PPE, and I would like Superintendent Gronseth just to speak for a minute on that.
Yes, we are very thankful to the help of our community partners in so many ways in our response to COVID-19. This is just one example of the ways that the county is supporting the school district. They provided us with some masks, gowns, disinfectant, sanitizer, and other items for our cleaning, but for our staff and our students to be using disposable masks. When students and staff or guests forget them, we are providing with them, and it's great to have the support of the county. We're also continuing to work with them and are expecting to see future items such as this from the county as well. So we thank them for their support.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicollet County. If no one else has an agenda item on the consent agenda that they would like to pull out or acknowledge, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the student spotlight. I think Principal Doherty probably has a few things to say.
Principal Doherty
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Chris, Mr. Overbo was chiming in, but we have a short video since we couldn't have our student spotlight individual students there tonight. So I put together a video, and our student spotlights are both in 4th grade. Ben Conlon is the student you'll see first in Miss Stokes' 4th grade classroom. And then Ziana Kapishki is another 4th grade student who is in Miss Matkowitz's classroom. So if Mr. Overbo can play the video, we'll let it roll.
Good evening, school board members. We're here at North Elementary School, and I have with me today Benjamin Conlon. He's our spotlight student in 4th grade. I was telling Ben, I wish we could be there for the school board meeting in person, to introduce Ben and try to explain just a little bit of why he was selected as a spotlight student here at North Elementary School. So Ben, so the board members know a little bit more about you. Like, what do you like when you're not at school? What do you choose to do with your time? What do you do?
Well, I do play hockey, and
Yeah. So he and I had a lot of talk about hockey since we both are big hockey fans. And then also Ben and a friend of his stopped me on the playground one day and they were talking about a comic, like a comic strip that we're working on, a comic book that we're working on, and they shared with me their draft idea of what they would love to do. They'd love to make comic books to sell here at North. The money could go toward like what we do with our Cats for Cause now, which is try to find an organization to donate the money to and have students buy the comic strips or the comic books. And I thought that was a great idea, so that's a project he's working on right now. So hockey, writing comic books, biking around. What about what does your family choose to do with free time at home? What do you end up doing? Like video games? You have video game? You have a favorite video game with a sister, you said?
yeah, and my friends with my sister, we do one of the programs where like we have like a game and then we go check it.
All right, build that. Okay. How about movies and TV shows you watch at home?
We like comics and fantasy.
Very good. Okay. And then how about just other interests? Looks like you got a number of things circled on the right side. What do you like?
Dog, writing, I do like acting, bike riding, computers, video games, science, and the army.
In the Army, okay, very good. Ben, I know you're very famous now because you're a spotlight student. You're going to be a famous student on the school board meeting. Everybody can see you online. And I bet your class is going to watch this. But also, other famous people would be the people you live with. So why don't you tell everybody at home like the names of your parents and any siblings?
My mom is Sarah Conlon. My dad is Corey Conlon. My sister is Vera Conlon.
All right, very good. So congratulations, parents and sister as well. Spotlight student, North Elementary School for the month of October. Congratulations, Ben. Now we have our second Spotlight student here at North Elementary School. I have with me right here is Ziana Kapishki. She's a fourth grader in Miss Mathowitz's room. And she's our second student for the month of October that got selected as a Spotlight student. So Ziana, what are some of the favorite things you like to do when you're not at school?
I like to listen to music, and I like to sing, and I like to hang out with some friends.
Very good, very good. How about Ziana and I were just talking about some of her favorite video games, her favorite movie and TV shows. What are those?
My favorite video game is Among Us, and my favorite movie is called Doug, and it stands for The Hate You Give, and my favorite TV shows is Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, we actually talked about The Hate You Give a little bit. I've read that story, she's seen the movie. Very great message, very powerful movie, so I love that you're talking about that. Tom and Jerry, we also shared that. We both, she watched the cartoon, I used to watch it as well. How about other favorite things that you just love in the world?
I like to sing, I like to swim, I like music, and I like faith, and I love the Army. I really want to go into the Army.
Very good. Now, do you have people that are serving, maybe family members that have served in the military?
Yeah, my grandpa, he actually delivered 7 babies.
Oh, wow. Like he was a medical, like he was in the medical field in the Army? That's really cool. So Ziana, I'm giving you an assignment for Veterans Day, which is coming up in November. We're going to put a bunch of pictures of people that we know that served in the military in that front hallway. So make sure you bring a picture of your grandpa in.
Yeah, I have to find a picture.
That's okay. Yeah, see if you can find some pictures so we can add them to all the people that have served our country, okay? All right, and again, this is Ziana Kapishki.
our North Star student who's in the student spotlight for our school board meeting. Congratulations, Anna.
Excellent, thank you so much. That was a wonderful video. Thank you, Principal Doherty.
Yep, you're welcome. I do have to add in there, we didn't get Ziana a chance to introduce her parents as well, so we want to make sure that we tell everybody her mom and dad name are Terry and Zach, and sister Zuri and Zariah at the middle school.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks to both of those students and their families. All right, with that, we'll move on to action items. I want to just point out that our first 3 action items were previously discussed in the past week or so at Personnel Committee, Finance Committee, and Return to School Committee. And then items 4 and 5 were discussed at multiple committees as well. But we'll dive right in to action item number 1, which is consideration of temporary change to substitute teacher and substitute paraprofessional rates.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. As you've heard us talk about, we've had a challenging time finding substitutes in the COVID pandemic environment. And many of our substitutes are former teachers, retired teachers, who would fall into a high-risk group and just don't feel that they can take the risk of subbing for us right now, which is certainly understandable. And we've also seen other districts in the region increasing their substitute rates. And so we want to stay competitive as with our rates, but we also want to encourage people to consider making a trip to St. Peter if they're living outside of St. Peter to substitute for us. We also plan to do a marketing campaign once we make this change to let people know that if they have a 4-year degree, they can sign up for what's called a short call substitute license with the state. And you don't have to have a degree in education. You can have a 4-year degree in anything and be a substitute teacher. And so we really want to get that word out and encourage people to give it a try. We know it won't be everyone's cup of tea perhaps, but I know that there are a lot of people who have considered going into teaching. It's a perfect opportunity to try it on. So we are recommending an increase from the standard rate of 130 right now to 175, and that means a half day would be $87.50. We're also proposing an increased rate for our paraprofessional substitutes, and that rate would be increased to $12.75 an hour. Both of these would be temporary for the school year, and we would actually review that in January. So we want to revisit it in January because of the change in funding that runs out in December, and to make sure that we can maintain that level and still remain within budget. But our hope would be to continue that through the duration of COVID-19.
Excellent, great. So this change is aimed at keeping us competitive, looking for that substitute workforce, and will be paid for with special money. So I think most of us have been in some of those committee meetings, but what initial discussion thoughts do people have?
I think the staffing has been a problem, just numbers wise, and I mean, and we're one episode away from having a bunch of teachers be out because of a relative getting COVID or themselves, or so I think that this is very timely and very important.
Excellent. Any other? Does someone want to make a motion?
I just have one question for Mr. Gronseth. Can you just review what kind of marketing you're going to do to get the word out that we do need some substitute teachers and paraprofessionals?
Sure. One of the things that we want to do is reach out to the graduate level students at the college to make sure that this opportunity gets to them, as it would be a great supplementary income with flexible hours for a college student. They can choose which days that they want to work. And then we want to get out on social media. You know, I think all of us have known that social media is where a lot of people are getting their news and their connection to the community, so we want to make sure that it's getting out on social media. But we'll also include it in our messaging that comes out in the form of emails to the community as well.
Thank you.
Excellent.
I move that we do the temporary change in rates for substitute teachers and substitute paraprofessionals.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Just for clarity, just because it's been discussed in multiple committees and not everyone is paying attention to those, a lot of thought went into this to make sure, and conversations with the different bargaining units to make sure that we are not surpassing the starting rate of either a teacher or a paraprofessional, to be as professional and up as we can be, but also remain competitive. So
That's a great point. Thank you, Drew. With that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to another item that was discussed in those 3 committee meetings as well, before it comes before us tonight. Consider proration of family first sick leave, or families first sick leave.
Yes, it's a connected topic for sure. We want to recognize that we are teaching in a different way than we traditionally have, with all teachers having students in person and students in hybrid and students on distance learning. There are some things that a substitute is unable to do because of our electronic platform, because of our software. Substitutes don't necessarily have the training to do that, but they also don't have the access to that particular teacher's software. So many of our teachers, while they are able to, whether they're in quarantine or they're home with a child who's in quarantine or another family member, they have continued to do the electronic portion of their teaching. And so we want to recognize that and prorate their leave. So if they have to be home, we would credit 2 hours of that time. And so 6 hours would be considered their family's first leave or sick leave, and 2 hours would be considered working. Given that the usual quarantine is for 14 days, you said 10 of those days were work days, they would have six of those days counting as sick, and 4 would be considered work time. And that's because if we had two hours Monday through Thursday, that adds up to an 8-hour day. And then all day Friday is an electronic day, so that one doesn't count either. So it's really 2 days a week that would be recognized as them working those hours. And so we have worked with the teachers union on this and came to an agreement that that was a reasonable amount to prorate for those times. And then, of course, if they were too ill to work, then they shouldn't work, and we want to recognize that too, and say that they don't have to do that responsibility. And in those cases, we would contact families and just say they're not able to today, and that they wouldn't be able to have that same live connection with their teachers, although they could still use the activities in Google Classroom.
I have a question about that too. I thought about this. So just because, I've known people now that have had COVID and you get really sick, like even for people to manage a Google Classroom won't really be possible. So hypothetically speaking, if we have teachers that are out for longer than a week or more, obviously, how are we managing those classrooms then during that time? I mean, because it could get kind of bad if like a bunch of people had it too, so.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing we have a great plan?
There's, depending on the scenarios, we have different ways of doing that. At the elementary level, we do have teachers who are dedicated to all distance learning that are very familiar with the software, and we could work out something with them to temporarily take those students. Or if we did have a substitute that was more of a long-term substitute, we could give them access to that program, and they could take that over.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like action items tonight 1 and 3 both work towards solving that problem, and this current action item is more about certainly if teachers, staff are sick, that's sick time, that's normal. This is just an MOU that allows some flexibility when teachers are quarantined,
Yeah.
but still they're working from home. Yeah. Any other questions or initial discussion? Would anyone make a motion to consider adoption?
Move to approve the MOU with the SPEA regarding payment to teachers.
I think we're still on action item number 2.
I'm sorry, I was called the wrong
That's all right.
Yes, I move to approve proration of families for sick leave. Sorry.
I'll second that.
There we go.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? And again, this, for the benefit of the public, we talked about for about 3 hours over the last week or so in public committee meetings. That's why we're a little less talkative tonight. But I will call the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. We'll move on to number 3, and this is consideration of an MOU with SPEA regarding payment to teachers asked to cover the duties of a teacher who is absent.
I was one ahead of myself.
No worries. And when a substitute is not available or not maybe as skilled in that area. So.
Yes, it is kind of a trio of MOUs that we've been working on, and just want to mention that it has been wonderful to work with SPEA on finding good solutions to these difficult situations. We have in the past had more at the secondary level from time to time when we're unable to locate a substitute that a teacher would cover another class. Typically, our secondary teachers have an open period during the day for their preparation time, and they'd be giving up their preparation time to go and cover someone else's class, and there's been payment for that. In our current situation, we've seen that become more prevalent, where we can't have a substitute come in, or we have, like last week when we had 6 staff members who had to quarantine, we just didn't have 6 substitutes, so our own staff was covering those courses. Sometimes it's a teacher who's what I would call a non-classroom teacher, so there's someone who provide interventions or provide some other supports, and they forego those duties for the day to cover for that teacher in their classroom. So that can happen both at the secondary and the elementary level, but because of the class periods in a day, it looks a little bit different. And we didn't have that in arrangement in place at the elementary, and we didn't have specific language at the secondary level. We had some common practices that we were doing, But what this does is it lays it out in writing so that everyone knows what the expectations are and defines what those dollar amounts would be. There's a few different scenarios that could happen at the elementary. One is, as I said, a non-classroom teacher is covering for maybe a half day or a whole day, and this lays out that they would be paid $40 additional, or for a half day, $80 additional for a whole day. And what they're doing is foregoing their regular duties that day and taking on different duties. This is recognizing that they're doing something that they weren't prepared to do and didn't plan on doing, and so that is what that payment is for. In another scenario, if we are unable to find a substitute and there's not another teacher to cover at the elementary level, sometimes we'll take that class and split them into other classrooms. So another teacher is taking on additional students for either that half or whole day. That too would be reimbursed at $40 for a half day, $80 for a whole day. And then if a teacher gives up their usual preparation time during a day, so our elementary teachers have preparation time while their students go to a specialist, so music, phy-ed, art, media. And if one of our specialists is absent, that means that there are 6 teachers during the day who are foregoing their preparation period and teaching the art or the music lesson that day themselves. And so that would be reimbursed at $40 to match their loss of preparation period. For the secondary, as I said, if they give up their preparation period by covering another class, that's $40. And then if a, sorry, my computer is taking over here. And then if a secondary teacher forgoes their usual duties to lead a classroom, so a non-classroom teacher taking on a class for the day would be $80 as well, just like at the elementary level. So as I mentioned, we work closely with the union to come to these terms and these dollar amounts, and I think it's fair and right that we would make these payments available for them to do this.
Excellent, thank you for that synopsis. Any initial discussion? Yeah, Dr. Soto.
Here, a question I have, the teachers are already being paid, and so what they're being paid for, they're not gonna do, but they're gonna go and do, fill in where needed, and we're adding additional money to them. And the question I have is, why are we doing that? Why wouldn't you just leave, just ask them, hey, you mind doing this? Why are we paying extra for that?
In most cases, they're giving up the preparation time that is guaranteed them by contract language. And so we are actually paying them to have their preparation time outside of their school day. And so it's, in most cases, the recognition of that loss of preparation time. And that would be that $40 amount. For others, it's a recognition that they're taking on additional duties on top of what they're already being asked to do.
And probably outside their position descriptions and their
Well,
contract.
I think of the elementary teacher who's taking on additional students who aren't generally in their classroom. And so they're taking on not only the extra students, but those students also aren't familiar with their classroom or how things work in their classroom, and they may have to do some extra work in recognition to make up for that.
So what if a secondary teacher has additional students for a half or a whole day? Because that might possibly happen, I would think, and maybe your specialist?
Well, I would say the majority of the time at the secondary level, people who are on their preparation period are covering for those. And So it's not as easy at the secondary level, because if you are the physics teacher, you can't really break up that physics class into other classes, because they're a different topic.
And it's my understanding this is already our current practice. We're just maybe formalizing it more in writing, just to settle expectations on all sides, to further clarify what's already happening.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The language wasn't there at the elementary level, it was at the secondary, but we're finding a need to do this at the elementary level. And principals, I'm sorry I didn't give you an opportunity to chime in if I had missed anything. Nope.
We're good?
Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move to accept the MOU with SPA regarding payment to teachers as to cover the duties of a teacher who is absent and a substitute is not available.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item number 4. Consider a draft budget for COVID-specific funding sources, and this was discussed in the Finance Committee as well as Return to School. And I think Business Manager Tim Regner is on video remote from his office if he wants to chime in, or Superintendent Gronseth.
I'll let Tim take this one.
Okay. Hello, guys. There should be a couple of things in your packet. The first is kind of a one-page synopsis of basically the CARES Act funding that we've received, and it's in a couple different parts. And the second one is one of the budgets, the second attachment. I'll just kind of briefly go through this. The CARES Act, we received money basically from the federal government through the state. We've got 2 different types of funds that we have gotten approved or given so far. The first is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or CRF, and the second is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds, GEAR, and the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Fund, ESSER, and those kind of work together. The first one, or the main one that's a concern, or the one we need to work on the quickest right now, is the CRF funds because of the timing of the funds. Basically, we received just over $600,000 from that. It was kind of allocated depending upon your ADM sizes and your historically underserved students, and that's how the different schools got the different amounts. The money must be spent between July 1st and December 30th of this year. And you can only spend it on things that are results of COVID, basically the health emergency, and they could not have been in the budget before July 1st. And they cannot be used for lost revenue or pay for expenditures that we get funded under some other program. Basically, it's to prioritize safety of students and staff, and the budgets need to be submitted, the initial budget needed to be submitted by September 30th. That's what we've got attached, and I believe we can adopt that and change that as we go, because the whole expense things is a pretty fluid depending upon how you're teaching, and just starting in September, we didn't know what a lot of the expenses would be or numbers that we would need. Some of the examples of what we have in the budget are obviously health and safety supplies, your PPE and hand sanitizers and those type of items. Cost for the school age care program, the additional staff hired there, the cost of extra custodials, housekeepers, some equipment, and we're trying to narrow that down a little bit more as we go. Staff development, if you remember in the summer, the staff did a big, some planning sessions for the learning modules for this fall. Possibly some transportation costs if there's more. Obviously technology has been a big cost, and basically anything to support the K through 12 learning experience. So where that really needs to go is we need to have the money spent and drawn by the end of December. So we're kind of working first on those funds to spend those. And the second monies is kind of year at ESSER, I guess for using the acronyms there. And they're basically a little more flexible on timing and what you can use them for. The gear funds, these funds must be spent by September 30th of 2022. So that's a longer period of time, obviously. And basically what the state has said, they encourage you to use the other funds first because you have through September to use these. We basically accepted the funds before and kind of submitted a budget, but we're still working on that because, you know, depending on what we spend the other monies on, will determine what we spend these monies on. The gear fund uses are basically for technology and some summer school programming. The ESSER are for health needs, connection to the school, effectiveness of learning, opportunities, and other local needs. And these can somewhat, they're a little more flexible and they can supplant some funds, or supplement some funds and not supplant. So they can be used for a few different things, or they can supplement, so there's a little less restrictions on those. The, you know, like I said, the budget that we've attached there is kind of our first initial run at that. And they will change because, you know, we didn't have a lot of the expenses in yet, or we're starting on that with school just starting in September and trying to get together what equipment or whatever else things would be needed as far as in technology, and also, you know, just like some water coolers and some sinks and things like that that were needed extra. So that will probably change over time, and you know, it's kind of a working document, I think, as we go on. But basically, it's a nice amount of money. Obviously, the $608,000 to help us get through the first half of the year. You know, the issue is going to come probably after January 1st if the stimulus package or something, the federal government's not passed, or any additional funds, and we still have the virus and we still have the extra funds, where we're going to go with that. We do have the couple $100,000 there, but those would run out pretty quickly. So I guess what we're kind of looking for tonight is to get approval to spend these, because this is an addition. Both of these are in addition, both the revenue and expenditures, to the preliminary budget tonight that we passed last June, I guess. So, you know, it's a lot of different moving parts, and we're trying to balance that with our other funding sources to make best use of all the money to better provide, you know, the services here for the distance learning and hybrid. And, you know, this will really change if we do change learning modules. You know, because it'll change if everybody's in school. Obviously, we won't need the daycare, but we'll probably have more transportation. Conversely, if we go to distance learning, we'll probably need more daycare and less transportation. So it's kind of going to be just revolving door a little bit. So I don't know if you have any questions or anything on that. Try to be a little brief here, but you know, it's a good program, and we're trying to make maximum use of it for the school.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I think the public out there, and certainly we appreciate the state and the feds contributing more money to education, especially in years like this where there's so much uncertainty and so many extra expenses. And a lot of us are probably like, oh, great, you have more money. But Tim, this is a lot of work for you, and I really appreciate all the time that you've put into creating, you know, new orgs and tracking expenses and making sure that this is spent by this deadline and this is spent by this deadline, and trying to estimate those things. And I think you said it was a moving target, and I think that's the most evergreen phrase about school finance that I could come up with, because it's always a moving target and it's always complex, and we just really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the draft budget?
I move to approve the draft budget for the COVID-specific funding sources.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And I agree, Tim, thank you for all your work on this. It's just it's illuminating when you sit in those committee meetings, you break these things down slowly and methodically, You're like, wow, we've got, I mean, it's great to have help from many levels of government and have funding sources available to us, but, yeah, there's always strings attached and rules to the game, and I'm just thankful that we have someone paying very close attention to those things, so thank you.
Great. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. I apologize, I forgot my iPad, so I'm trying to track this stuff on my phone, and I have bifocals, and I have a mask on, so it's every day's a battle. All right, we're going to move on to item number 5 on our action items. Consider temporary adjustment to teacher evaluation. Superintendent Gronseth.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. This is yet another change that we are making due to COVID-19. We have a very full evaluation program here in the district that is really aimed at professional growth opportunities and continuous improvement for our staff and for our programs. And being that, we do have several elements of our teacher evaluation program that go above and beyond what is required. And while we want to continue some of those professional growth opportunities, we've built them into activities that our staff is already doing, such as their professional learning communities. And we worked again with the Spea to really come to an agreement on what this could look like, taking perhaps some of the items off of the teacher's plate, recognizing that they are working so hard to provide great opportunities for our students. So this program is basically looking at the first 2 years of a 3-year cycle and easing up on some of the requirements or some of the elements of these. This change would only be in place during COVID, and our hope would be to go back to the really enriched program that we had in the past. So probationary teachers would still be evaluated, and people would still have their what we call a 3-year evaluation. Those would still be in place. It's just some of the other elements that we'd be easing up on.
I apologize for asking this question out of left field, but in a rough sense, do we have, how many teachers are in that probationary period of the first 3 years?
Now I have to look to the principals for that number. Being new myself,
that's not really fair to ask in the heat of a meeting.
There are 3 at South.
I have 5 at North.
1 in early childhood.
I believe we have 10 at the middle school.
We generally have anywhere between 5 and 10 at the high school as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than I thought. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Good. So we got a document in the agenda, in our packet, I should say. What's changed? Is this what they do, or is this what they will do? I guess I would be curious as to what's being dropped in this evaluation.
This is the document that you received. You're talking about the one with the 3 columns?
Yes.
That is what they will do. So the pieces that have been changed are kind of attached to our lack of substitute teachers. One of the pieces is the opportunity for teachers to observe each other's classrooms, but we would typically bring in substitute teachers to cover classrooms to free them up to do those observations, and we're just not able to do that piece of it. Doreen, can you help me out? What else did we?
changed there?
The only other thing that was changed on there, number one, was the IRPs, and that's the peer reflection or peer interaction part that you talked about. The other thing that has changed is typically for our probationary teachers, their second evaluation is done by an administrator from another building. So the only thing that we changed is they will still have 3 formal observations, but rather than pushing other people into classrooms, we are going to do all 3 at our sites individually. So that's just something that St. Peter has done in the past. The other thing that changed for cohorts 1 and 2 is that rather than a whole formal, using the same form that we have used for the formal evaluation, cohort 3 and probationary people, we are going to be using more of a checklist form for them involving those components that are listed on the sheet.
I have one more question that isn't really relevant to whether we pass this or not. I'm just curious, as how many walkthroughs does someone get during a school year? Principal walkthroughs?
I believe we have written, or we talked about it, anywhere from 5 to 10 walkthroughs.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
And we're talking 3-minute walkthroughs into a classroom.
Thank you.
I move we approve the, we don't have a motion on the floor, right? We've not yet.
No, we
So
don't.
I
Not
move
yet.
we approve the temporary adjustment to teacher evals for the time being, 2021.
I'll second that.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, move on to school board superintendent goal setting. We talked about this at length during our study session a couple weeks ago, and I thought more about it, but did not get super active until this afternoon, and then my printer died. So my thoughts are not in, oh, there. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it. That is a picture from my phone of my copy there. But I wrote this up and thought that we could discuss it, and there's some information from Barb Dorn from MSBA as well in our packets. I didn't type mine up in fancy charts as she did, but you know, out of that study session, I thought we came up with 3 goals, and if that was wrong, we have time to correct it. But those 3 goals were operate the district effectively and safely during COVID, or something to that effect. Successfully plan for an operating referendum to go to voters November 2021. And I added that extra language because we are talking about fiscal year 21 goals, which end at the end of June. So obviously we're not going to base these successes on a past referendum, because that will not have taken place yet. But we did list the referendum as one of the key goals. And then goal 3, building successful relationships and communication strategy. So those are the big goals. And then I wrote kind of 3 more specific, measurable outcomes for each of those. If we want different outcomes, we can choose different outcomes. This was just something that I worked on. So if we could go up to goal number 1 again, and this is that COVID, comply with legal requirements while also understanding guidance from MDH, MDE, the governor, federal government, Facebook, whatever other sources of information there are, and how that affects St. Peter School District. The second one would be to be current on all data, funding sources, expert information on matters of operating our district effectively and safely during the pandemic, and we can talk about whether those are actually the same thing or not. And then foster open communication with district stakeholders. And I know that communication is its own priority, but communication also seems really embedded and fundamental to COVID as well. So I called it out, but again, we can decide to do whatever. Maybe the most effective thing would be goal by goal. So how do people feel about that? What's missing? What is too much? John?
So I think with the fluidity of the COVID situation, continually, and it's sort of reflected, but it kind of isn't coming off as more like educational, but I'll just say what I was going to say. But continually reviewing best practices for the district as well as the classroom, and I mean, I guess that's both things, but I think that's something that's constantly changing, and it should be an important part of deciding which direction we go next. I don't know. I think that's pretty true for every job right now, honestly.
So as I read these, I kind of thought that A and B there was a lot of overlap there, and I like what you have to say. So what I hear is maybe if we changed B to continuously review best practices for operations and learning.
Yes, that would be perfect, actually. You are a wordsmith. That's very nice.
Any other thoughts about those first two or the third, or?
Are we bringing in or utilizing anybody locally that's a healthcare provider, public health? Are we using anybody locally that can give us input too? Because each region is its own entity from a public health standpoint. So if we're listening just statewide, this is what we're doing, that's maybe a little bit, needs to be more refined to our location.
Superintendent Gratza?
Sure.
Well, he's thinking, I mean, we do have a relationship with public health, Nicollet County Public Health, I'm sure LeSueur County Public Health
Right.
as well.
Exactly, and I was, actually, the person from the county is right here in St. Peter, so they're local. I was just trying to tie that into the goal, so I got sidetracked. But yeah, we do speak with people right here in St. Peter, not just at the state level, although much of our guidance does come from the Department of Health and from the state. We work with county too.
And maybe throw that in A somehow?
Yeah, federal government, local health experts, and et cetera.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dr. Soderlund, thank you. Does anybody feel like communication shouldn't be here because it's its own goal, or is it?
I think it's fine.
I think it needs to be on there. This is really an important issue to keep the message out there. Why are we doing what we're doing? And addressing people that are frustrated in the direction that we're going, and listening to what they have to say, and maybe we need to modify something. But I think that communication is very important in this goal.
Yeah, thank you. And to me, it feels like different communication. Like,
agreed.
The communication goal has other objectives. This is a very specific thing. Anything else to add to goal number 1? And again, I just wrote these up so that we would have something to talk about. I did them at 3 o'clock, so it's not going to hurt my feelings if people hate them or want something completely different or anything. Goal number 2. Successfully plan for operating referendum to go to the voters November 2021. So the first point, create an overall district budget for the near and long term that considers needed expenditures, all sources of revenue, and includes the operating referendum in that planning. So we can't divorce district finances and district strategic planning and that long-range budget from planning for a referendum, because that will be a part of that pie. 2, follow all legal requirements. We don't want to do anything illegal. This is really, really important. It's complicated. And as we know from prior levies and requests to the public, there's a lot that goes into that. And then creating a district communication plan. Again, that's communications, but that would be specific to the referendum and included in that. I had more words in there before, but that is, articulating what our need is, both from a narrative standpoint and from a financial standpoint. That is addressing how we can get the word out. And as we all know, the district cannot tell people to vote yes. We are only out there to give the facts, and one of those facts is how we are going to use this money and why we need it. Another fact is what it will do to people's property taxes in a general sense. And then if there is a vote yes committee that forms, that is separate from the school district. I know when we did the referendum for the capital project and the high school, that included driveway meetups, that communications plan, so things like that could be in there, but we need a plan. And we might not be actively engaged in carrying out that plan by the end of June, because as we're in the midst of a campaign now, maybe not everyone wants to hear all of that information in June, July, August, September, October, and November. Maybe we could start in September, October.
I think District 508 has had a long standing tradition when it comes to asking for taxpayer money, of asking for only what we need, or what we deem that we need versus what we want. And I expect that will continue into this next year, or the year after, or the year after. I think that's important to our voters. I think it's important to all of us. Moderation. I get why we have legal requirements. I think I would just kind of expect that to be part of the gig, but I get it. Yeah, and I think communications plan is definitely a big one. That's going to be a large part of the key, I think.
Along with the legal requirements, are there like timelines and things like that, deadlines of things that you probably need to do by a certain date? I don't know if that needs to, you can add that to the legal requirements, so it doesn't look so much like we're only going to follow the legal requirements when it comes to the operating levy, which is not the case, but
they are important.
They are important.
Sure.
And I would be okay with C being kind of cleaned up to talk about, even after the vote, of we're just presenting information, an information plan. I don't know, it's not strategic because but we want to make sure that we're doing a good job of getting the story out there of why we're asking for that. And so I thought when you said the word information and how important it is that's kind of what we do, and what we want our superintendent to lead. I think that's, I don't know how you do it, but I'm totally fine with that being cleaned up even afterwards, because I think it'd be just being more clear about what you put down. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I'm just saying that if we don't have to create it tonight, is my point. That exact wording.
I think if we're in agreement with the bones of this, my fear was that if I just kept kicking this can down the road,
Right.
us asking to reflect on goals in February when we didn't set them until mid-November isn't super fair. So, but I think if we agree on the bones of it, the structure.
I think the person that we're evaluating understands what we're asking. I just think it's the people that are wondering what we are evaluating.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that's more for them than for the actual superintendent and the school board.
And we're not gonna add like a fourth goal to like become super great at doing balloon animals or something like that in November.
I can do balloon animals. I was an elementary teacher, so.
Go ahead and add that.
I legitimately would like to see some balloon animals at some point, so. Moving on to the third goal, build successful relationships and communication strategy. So I was trying to really embrace our discussion of communication being key, really from a twofold perspective. We have a new superintendent who's new to the community and new to the district. And so that should be a goal, to build relationships that when you're here in your 8th year that's not going to become part of your priorities, because you will have accomplished that. But I think another part of this is how to think strategically and how to build a communications plan that thinks about what channels we use to communicate with the public, and also our messages across those channels, and just maybe refining those and becoming a little bit more strategic, I guess, is a word I've used many times. But kind of the 3 bullets that I had were work to develop relationships and deep working knowledge, and I used working twice, so I'm going to wordsmith that. But a deep working knowledge across all district buildings and operations among all bargaining units and administrators. So you're going to have to take some time, and you've been doing that so far, but to learn our district real well. Create an overall communication strategy to ensure district information is shared widely, accurately, conveniently, and coherently. And then actively participates in civic life through the district, through local organizations, area businesses, community groups, and individual relationships. So that idea that, we want you to have some off time, but the reality of a superintendent is you're a superintendent when you're at the grocery store. But, part of, I think, one of the things I really like about our community and small communities like ours and the school district, and I'm sure this was true in Duluth too, so it's not just small communities, but you really are a community leader, and we need you to bring your expertise to leading the district, but you can also bring that expertise to represent us on a city committee or on the chamber board or at Rotary. Those kinds of things I think are really important too. And again, that's probably not something that's going to be on your list 3 years from now, but I think it is smart for us to expect that, and it is smart for us to expect you to build those relationships and show us how you're integrating into your new community. So.
I think the first step is to get a mask that says I'm the new superintendent.
Definitely. No, I like where this is going, Ben. I just want to make sure that we are clear, because it's going to be very hard for us to evaluate him unless we have clear set ways of doing that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've seen Bill down at the grocery store, and we've done superintendent work in the middle of the toothpaste aisle. So I know that he does communicate and is the superintendent outside of work. So but we got to figure out how to, make sure that whether he's communicating with you and says, here are the groups I'm in, or here's here's what I've done to communicate. If he has to document that, we just have to let him know so we can have a good sound way of saying, yep, you nailed that goal. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, I'd like to hear from you on ways that you think you can illustrate that you're achieving these, because if you're unable to illustrate them, they're not fair goals, as Tim said. So.
But, you know, I think that one, you know, I was thinking about that too. How do you show a relationship? How do you prove a relationship? And, you know, I think about presentations that I've been doing for Lions Club and Rotary and, you know, different the ways I've been involved with the chamber or interacting with the city. And, you know, I have like the presentations that I did, or memberships, or, you know, like on the legislative committee for my association of superintendents. That's not a local thing, but it is civic engagement that benefits our school district at the legislature. So, you know, there are different ways that I could show that. But in general, relationships are hard to show unless you're gonna survey the population to see if they have a relationship. But I can show different ways I was involved.
Just as long as you're comfortable, I mean, in my world, this is just my opinion, that you're comfortable that we can effectively evaluate that when the time comes. That's.
Yeah, I think that goal 3, you know, B, create a communication strategy. That's a plan. That's easy to check off the list, or have a, you know, a physical paper you can hold in your hand. I think that the other stuff is a little bit squishy, but I also really like it as a priority, and I know we all think that those things are a priority. So I guess if I was, you know, I don't want to tell you have to join 3 committees. I want you to find your passion, and
yeah,
you're gonna be a community leader in the best possible sense if you're doing things that are your passion. And if that's a church, great. If that's the chamber board, great. If that's something else, great. But, you know, listing those, looking at there, saying I spent, you know, X% of my job, or X number of hours in classrooms, or every Friday I was out in a building. You know, that's like, I don't need to know down to the minute as one board member, but just a general sense of, here's the amount of time that I put into building these relationships. Those kinds of things is what I would look for.
You could just do a general survey out to everyone and ask them if they've ever seen them in the grocery store and had a conversation. Just push the survey out.
In the toothpaste aisle.
In the toothpaste aisle.
Since
We love surveys.
I'm new to this, from an evaluation standpoint, are we going to have input from the principals then, or if we're discussing communication within the district? I mean, are we just making this evaluation ourselves? Where are we getting the input from?
Yeah, John, I don't know if you want to speak to you certainly don't have to, but I think we've all had a chance to weigh in on each of these categories and fill out more of a 360 evaluation. And I think we should go over what the end process is fairly quickly. And we can do a mid-year check-in in February, at the February board meeting, and kind of go over that process. But I'm not giving you a very specific example of it because I unfortunately am not super clear on all of the details of
Yeah,
what I've done in the past.
Chair Leonard, I just remember the process being that there was an evaluation that we filled out that, and then we also got it from the other side, from the administrators, and to kind of go over and discuss and check the progress. I think that's how we do that process, I think, is down the road a bit, and figuring out what questions would be relevant. And what we really want to do is help our superintendent do his job to the best of his ability. And I think one thing that's been unique on this board is that we've asked the superintendent, what do you want to know? You know, as part of, we know what we want to know, but what do you want to know in order to say that you're doing what you want to do, and what you're trying to do is having the impact that you're hoping for. So that's how I remember it.
Thank you.
Going. Drew, you agree?
Well, I think I do, and I think Dr. Soderman was asking the question because I believe that you think it's important to get feedback from the administrators, and I agree with you. I think that's definitely part of this.
Tim, do you want to add? I feel like I should be able to just recite exactly everything.
No, I mean, I think it's important that you get feedback, and if you want 360s, that's part of the deal. I mean, you know, I do 360s for my supervisor at work, and my direct reports do 360s on, with just saying, hey, here's what he's good at and here's what he's not. And it's good to know what you're good at and what you're not. I think for us, and we got to concentrate on these goals, because this is what we're saying is important to us. So when I think about, you know, the administrators have their own goals that they're muddling through on COVID-19. This is what we're concentrating on to see how he's doing. That's the way I see it. So, yep, if Bill's getting feedback from people saying you got to be nicer, I'm just using that as an example, Bill. I think you're pretty nice so far. Anyway, but from our standpoint, we're saying we want a good communicator. We want someone who's going to lead us through this pandemic, which we're 6-8 months in already, and someone who's going to concentrate on the finances and make sure that we're, like Drew said, we're not asking for luxury. We're asking for what we need to maintain and make sure that our kids are getting what education that they need and deserve.
Thank you. That really clears it up. And just to emphasize, we all want Superintendent Gronseth to be extremely successful, and I have every expectation that that's going to happen. I'm just trying to clarify this so.
Yeah, it's great.
Yep.
That's good.
No, it's a great question. And just to follow up on your point is the one thing that I'm always conscious of or cognizant of is that we all are doing different professions besides education. And so I think the input that we get from administrators who make that, education their profession, I think their input is important for us to help us evaluate our superintendent. So
Absolutely. The other piece of this that I was remembering after I punted, and I don't know, we'll talk about this too. I think one of the things that I always lamented in prior superintendent evaluations wasn't directly tied to the evaluation of the superintendent necessarily, but it was like reviewing the year and reviewing things and saying like, okay, this was a major event. Would we have handled this differently? And I don't know if that's part of a superintendent review, but I always felt like I couldn't bring it up in a superintendent review because I genuinely thought the superintendent did a really good job. But maybe I thought something could have gone differently, but we just never talked about it in that context. So either maybe looking at a year-end review of the district activities, like in the Army after a mission. I'm blanking on what they call that.
Debrief.
Debrief, thank you.
So if I look back at our previous agenda item on the teacher evaluation thing, there's really different aspects of that. I think there are some activities that you do because they're good for professional growth and continuous improvement. Things like debriefs, which the administrative team and I do on a number of things, like, okay, we just did that for the first time, let's talk about what went well and what we can improve on. And I think 360s are another great professional growth model, where you're getting feedback on specific areas and you're hearing about, things you're doing well, but also areas that you need to work on. And then there's the formal evaluation piece, where you're saying, all right, right now we're looking at these 3 aspects. That doesn't mean that that's the the everything, but it's the 3 things that we're agreeing that these are the things you're going to document and show that you're doing well on, because we're saying these are priorities. I still want all of that other feedback. I want the administrative feedback, and I hope I get it on an ongoing basis through my work with them. And if we did a 360 at the end of the year, they do that with their teachers as well. I see that more as a professional growth tool for myself than an evaluative tool. I think that they could provide input on the goals, and they could provide evidence on those goals. Not that I want, I know that those 3 goals don't even begin to encapsulate all of the responsibilities that I have as a superintendent. But those are the things that we're saying, make sure you do these 3 really, really well. So however you want to provide that feedback is fine.
Yeah, and I think too, the other thing that we're saying with these goals is we have an expectation that you document these.
Yeah.
And spend some time. And so if we gave you 10, that would be really difficult, because you would have to document, document your workday in real time, like 1 minute equals 1 minute. So we don't want that. But I too agree that, it's monthly meetings, it's one-on-ones, it's those kinds of things that are gonna tell us what we need to know. All right, well, if anybody has any more feedback on this, we can discuss it now. You can get that to me, but I will work on tightening this up.
So we will not take action on this item tonight, correct?
Do we feel comfortable taking action on the main, there are 3 different priorities, and then there are ways to illustrate those priorities.
I agree. I think the descriptors underneath can be tweaked, but I think we should pass the goals, because I think that those are what we had talked about. And I move that we pass the superintendent goals for 2020-21 school year.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Dr. Sutherland. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of these goals for superintendent evaluation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for, I'm sure no one could tell that that's the first time that I've done that. So.
I do want to compliment Chair Leonard for going with 3 goals. We were strongly over and over encouraged to only have 2, and it made sense to have these 3 with the new, with Mr. Gronseth being new to the district. So I commend you on going with 3.
Well, thank you. It made sense, and for me, yeah, there is the new one, and there is that new work that has to be done on communication and community building, but also COVID. You can't not have COVID in there, but COVID is just this weird thing that needs to be addressed, but also will hopefully go away after this year.
Yeah, maybe it'll just go away, and that goal will be like, well, I couldn't do anything because it went away.
I found the cure.
Yes, I cured COVID. That would be above and beyond
Yeah,
our
that would be
expectations.
exemplary with the curing COVID. I'll get right on that.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we'll move on to action item number 7, which is our last action item. This is the second reading of policy 5.4, which is school board policy prohibiting harassment and violence. We had added some language that is legally required, that we want to make sure that we are meeting the legal standard. We had the first reading last board meeting. I have received no comments or suggestions for changes.
I have not received any further comments or changes either.
Anyone, barring any initial conversation, want to make a motion to pass the revised board policy 5.4?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That is the end of our action items. We'll move on. We have one information item tonight, and it's kind of a big one, but I know that in between the study session, where we talked about it a little bit, we have had a number of committee meetings of the board, and I know that we've heard from some constituents. Constituent Brian Fell did speak before the Return to School Committee. I know we've received several emails and probably had personal conversations with people on all sides of this. But let's have an update about COVID-19 learning models and data review.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. And since the weekly study session, where you kind of shared some of the questions that you had, the administrative team and I have spent some quality time together, working through a lot of the details. So this presentation will include a review of the state requirements, some COVID-19 data requirements that we would need to meet to change our model of instruction, the decision-making process, and then some next steps. So you may hear the questions that you presented at the study session being addressed through this time. So if we haven't answered them by the end, feel free to chime in. We'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions. But as you remember, the state way back in the last spring gave us 3 models to work for: the in-person, the hybrid, and the distance. So in person, I just want to say, means that we're not social distancing. The students are there all day, every day, and they're all on the bus and they're all in the class, and we at that point wouldn't have to have the 6 feet of distance between students. The hybrid model is when we get to that, the 50% capacity rules apply. And we also have to have that 6 feet social distance. And that's what we've been in, a combination of in-person and virtual learning, and then distance learning, where we're all too familiar with that nobody's at school, and we haven't had to do that yet. Just as a reminder of the state guidelines, and it's all based on that 10,000 cases per 10,000 over 14 days, and these are the numbers that below 10 is when everybody can be all in, elementary and high school. That 10 to 19, our elementary could be all in and hybrid for our secondary. The 20 to 30 is hybrid for all, and then 30 to 49 is hybrid for elementary, distance for high school, and then if you're over 50, that's when everyone has to go in distance learning. Of course, it could be things other than just these numbers that get us there. It could be our own capacity to be able to provide these services that puts us in any given model. I know there's been some questions about this formula, and I still go back to the visual they provided in the state guidance, because I think it makes the math a little bit easier to figure out. Is you take that total number of cases for any 14-day period, and then divide that by the population of the county divided by 10,000. So in our case, Nicollet County has about 32,000 people. So you take that total number of cases for 14 days and divide by about 3.2, and you would come up with that cases per 10,000 number. So this is a graph of our data since school started. And each Thursday, MDH publishes COVID numbers, as you know, for the county. These numbers are 2 weeks behind because they allow time to do what they call scrubbing the numbers. So they want to make sure that the cases that they have in their files are actually from that county and that they're positive. And from time to time, you do see this number adjusted by maybe 1 or 2 by the time from the time that we see the current numbers, because we're also provided with current numbers. Sometimes there is a difference between those two numbers, and that's because they've maybe a college student was applied to the wrong county, or someone was applied to the wrong county, and so they make that adjustment. So what we are watching for is trends in the data, and we talk with the county and we talk with the Department of Health, and we want to see someone playing the electric guitar.
It's a jug band.
So we want to see downward trends for at least 3 weeks before the state will have us change models. So when we look at the data that are on these graphs, Nicollet is the dark blue and LeSueur is the lighter blue. You can see that when we started school, LeSueur was pretty high and then saw a downward trend. And just when we were both getting to a downward number, we both started heading back up. So a couple of weeks ago, we had considered looking at changing our model and bringing our elementary students in. And when we talked to the county and we looked at the current numbers along with the trends, we could see that the trend was upward. And ever since that time, it has been trending upward rather than downward. And so that's why we've stayed in the hybrid model. Technically, our numbers were low enough that we could have been in person for maybe a week, but at that time, we were trending upwards, and we knew that, keeping in mind these are 2 weeks behind, so when we were at that low point, we knew that the current numbers were just about to cross 20, and so that's why we made the decision to recommend staying in hybrid. We'll go to the next one, Darren. Thank you. So there are also some questions, and I realize you can't read this, but I hope it's not the first time you've seen this chart. This is the decision tree that was provided by the Department of Health. And there are the questions that we had about quarantine and how long someone goes in quarantine and how do you decide if they have to go to quarantine or not, or which symptoms or which. We use this decision tree to help us, and if we ever have a doubt, we get on the phone with the county or the Department of Health and help them. They help us to apply this decision tree to our specific situations. So it tells us whether they're out for 10 days or they're out for 14 days. You just follow that through with whatever applies to you. So if you're a person with one symptom or one of the more common symptoms or two of the less common symptoms, or people who have a close contact, which has been primarily the the most prevalent is that someone has been exposed to someone with a positive case, although that hasn't happened during the school day. It is the most common reason for our staff and students to need to quarantine. Currently, we have one positive case among the staff, and we have 4 students and staff in quarantine. That's certainly a lower number than we had last week and a lot lower than we had the week before.
Right, this one I can speak to as long as everybody can hear me. And I do have to provide full disclosure. I may or may not have had a 19-year-old playing his electric guitar at the Doherty household.
Smoke of a
Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This slide is in reference to questions that some of you have had and been fielding from our community members about elementary levels being either all in person or in hybrid. And so Dorian and I did some number punching, and first, if you kind of think back to that slide that Mr. Gronseth spoke to that talked about the all-in structure versus the hybrid, all in person gets rid of the 6-foot social distancing expectation, not only in the classroom, but then also on busing, on the playground, obviously, in the cafeteria, common areas of our buildings. And then there's the hybrid, and the hybrid schools at the elementary level and at the middle school level, and probably high school in some school districts, have taken the angle of the 50% like fire marshal capacity rather than the hybrid model as a blend of in-person instruction and distance learning instruction. And so if you look at our classrooms at South and North, our classroom sizes are similar, and they can hold, based on the 50% capacity, maximum of 18 individuals in our classroom spaces. So that being the case, if we wanted to define our hybrid model based on a 50% capacity of our classrooms at the K4 level and still maintain, able to maintain that social distance and provide a well-rounded and rigorous level of instruction, maintaining levels of backup for absent teachers when they do happen, still meet the Department of Education and Health requirements. We need to reassign a couple intervention teachers. We'd also need to hire 6 full-time elementary teachers. We'd need to reassign about up to 40% of the students in all the homerooms at kindergarten through the 4th grade level to move them into the new classrooms. And then we would still be able to maintain like 3 distance-only K4 elementary teachers. We'd also need to reduce specialist time. So if we looked at our Phi-Ed, art, music, and STEM, those would be reduced to about 25 minutes apiece, still on the 5-day rotation. And then also we need to maintain the social distancing on the busing, which would mean increasing bus routes, the number of buses out picking up students. So those are things that we would have to consider in doing an all in-person elementary level to maintain the 50% capacity and still call it hybrid. A lot of area elementaries, I don't know about a lot, but some area elementaries are calling it a hybrid, but it's actually a reduced class size all in person form of instruction with adjustments to no specialist intervention and students stay in their classroom all day long. So there's certainly, I've talked to a number of elementary principals in the area and that structure that are doing the all in, but they call it the hybrid, that are very nervous about the ability to maintain that structure if especially staff members end up getting sick or going into quarantine, because there's not additional levels of support when people start needing to quarantine or are sick. Are there any questions on this slide in particular?
That's very helpful, Mr. Doherty, the presentation you just gave. Thank you.
Yep.
And then, Superintendent Gronseth, I know you've said this before, and Darren, if you and Doreen want to weigh in on this as well, those, it said hire an additional 6 teachers. That this is an on-paper exercise. Whether or not you could find 6 teachers is is very debatable at this point.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, we don't have the budget to do that because that would be about $500,000. Okay. Oh yeah, this is me. Sorry. I'm like, whose slide is that? It's mine. We just wanted to talk through some of our decision making. We've already mentioned a few of the pieces, but the constant monitoring of the COVID data. Luckily, we have Tim Regner with us, who is like, he's a spreadsheet whisperer. And he is in charge of the official spreadsheet that we keep that has all of the current data, and he of course has built the formulas into his spreadsheet so that it automatically tracks all of those numbers for us. And then we also are constantly monitoring on another spreadsheet our staff rates of quarantine and our students quarantining and the number of positive cases. As we mentioned just last week, or was it the week before? Time is flying by me here. We came very close to not having the capacity to continue, at least at South, when we had a number of staff members who had to quarantine. And if we had, Doreen was saying it was like a Jenga tower. If there was one more person, all of the pieces wouldn't have fit together. And so we are constantly monitoring how many people we have, how many people can cover, and that may very well become one of our decision makers, is that we run out of adults to operate. We also, for the same reason, monitor COVID-19 data for each building. When the state came up with a new dashboard, I think I shared it with you last week in my update, that they publish any school that has 5 or more cases of COVID that are active. And that is because at that level, they start considering at the state level recommending temporary closing or going to distance learning for that school to get kind of just a handle on the number of cases, especially if they are being, how they're being spread is another thing that the state helps us work through. If they were ever to be a case that was spread at school, they're very quick to step in and recommend going to distance learning. So that's another thing that we track. We have ongoing communication with the county and state. In addition to our weekly meetings, we're often on the phone or sending emails asking specific questions, especially when we have cases of exposure. When we had the positive case with several close contacts within the district outside the school day, we spent quite a bit of time talking with them. I know that Rachel Fitch, our nurse, also has a weekly meeting with the Department of Health, so she's getting updates. And from facilities, from business, we all have very COVID-specific meetings that are new to our schedules this year. And then MDE continues to change guidance. We have a call with MDE every week that is followed with an email that usually has some kind of update or change to the guidelines, and we make sure that we're changing our practices or our decision-making models based on new information that comes out. And then if we did get to the point that we thought that we could change our model, say we wanted to bring all of our kids back in at the elementary level, there's a form that we need to fill out electronically for MDE, and I need to contact the Commissioner of Education with our intent to change learning models. And then they will come in and do a review and tell us if we can do that or not. What they are generally looking for is 3 weeks of downward trend numbers. So it's, you know, it's not, oh, hey, this Thursday we went below the line so we can change tomorrow. There is a process in place that we need to follow. And then we would call a special board meeting with you to help make that decision. The only thing that would change that is if the state stepped in and said, you're going distance learning tomorrow. And at that point, it would be a meeting after the fact to tell you why that, what the situation was that led to a sudden change. I think that there have only been 2 districts where I've seen that happen, and it was because there was kind of a single event where a large number of people were all exposed at the same time, and they needed to act quickly so that they could get a handle on the situation. So that is kind of the data that leads our decision making and some of the process that we would need to go through to be able to make that. Questions or anything that principals want to add to that?
Okay, the next slide just really outlines what we currently have on the left-hand side, our K-4 hybrid model of instruction, and we currently have students coming on an A day or a B day, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then all students in the district are doing distance learning on Fridays. When we have the hybrid distance learning day, so they're off day when they're not on site, students are using our online platform called Seesaw, and they're using tools such as our IXL Math, we have Lexia, we have some guided reading materials, and they're really kind of taking an extension of what they're doing during the school day with teachers when they are on site. For students that are all distance learning, they have actual scheduled times to meet with their teachers so that they can get some of that small group instruction along with, we call them synchronous lessons. When they're live, the teacher tells them what time they need to be online to get their instruction for that day. And there are several sessions throughout the day. It varies a little bit based on which grade level you are in, and each grade level has kind of tweaked it based on what the needs of those students are. They also have asynchronous lessons, meaning activities that are uploaded on their Seesaw, and it may be a recording, it may be an activity that they push out to the students to complete, and then the students use their technology to respond back, and the teacher is able to check that information then via their Seesaw platform. Although that model, we've got it up and running, there are a few things that we continue to do. So we are continually looking at our model to examine and see other ways that we can do more, or we can do things a little bit differently. I believe each of the buildings, and this isn't just a K-4 thing, all of us have really tracked both the attendance and the progress of students who are not fully engaged. And then our goal has been to reach out. What interventions can we put in place to support these families? Because we also know that there's a possibility that any time we could have to switch to all distance. And I think if we learned anything from our emergency education last spring, it was that we need to have these parents and these students prepared to go online, all online at any time. And we need to make sure that they can use the tools that we're providing for them. So the first few weeks of school were really about getting them the tools and getting them used to the tools. And now it's following up with them and checking to see how can we help support you and make sure that your child has what they need, and how do we help you. Some things that we've done is we really did just start with friendly phone calls, like, hey, we noticed that your attendance didn't get in. Do you know how to do your attendance? We sent out information. We had parents come in. We've done some home visits to go and help support families if they are not able to come in. We've also provided a huge amount of tech support to families. Everything from come on in and we'll show you how to use this to pushing out some videos. And we also, in the last couple of weeks, have sponsored 2 language parent nights. So we had one, a Somali language support night for parents, and we also had a Spanish tech support night. And through those 2 nights, we were able to support 27 families were in attendance, 28 families were in attendance. And I just have to say kudos to both Afi and Maripsa, because without them, along with Kari Bly and Laura Zender, they spearheaded it, and Afi and Maripsa really came to help support those families, and we just had them come with their students and the iPads, and we just took them through some activities, and again, we continue to follow up with them to make sure that they know how to use that tool. All sites also had a parent survey that went out today, at some time throughout the day. So we will take that information that we gather from that and look to see how do we improve our instruction. We asked everything from, is the rigor, what is the rigor like? Is it enough? Is it too much? What is the workload like? And we broke it down into the various areas so that we can really try to tweak our instruction and make it what parents feel is a nice balance. We are also continuing to work with staff to identify what are the needs. I have follow-ups coming in every day from my staff as far as who are the students that we are helping to support, has there been progress on that, and if not, then we put another intervention in place to see how we can help support them. Meeting with Afi and Maripsa every week, and again, just through a lot of communication between the school and the homes to make sure that we are able to do this the best that we can. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but thank you. That was very thorough and informative, and I appreciate that.
I do have to say at the K4 level, we have had several students transition back from our distance learning plan. At least we have really shifted a lot of students, I think, once people were able to see some of the precautionary measures that we have in place, the protocols, we really have been able to make them feel safe, and they have, several families have returned to in-school learning with that.
Thank you.
Yes. This is something that we, the principals and I spend quite a bit of time together. It feels like sometimes we do have a meeting every day at 1:15 as our COVID check-in daily, and that's how we are sharing information about if we have any changes in practice or if we have had any exposures or new cases, keeping tabs on that. And then we also have our weekly meeting where we're also often reviewing our instruction and talking about ways that we can improve. If we see barriers come up or things that people are sharing, we talk about how to improve those and how to provide the best support that we can. And as I said, the surveys went out today. I've heard that some of them are already coming back, many of them thankful and feeling like things are going well, and others with some really good feedback. So we look forward to looking at those results and continuing to improve the services that we're providing in this crazy time.
I have a question. A feedback that I've been hearing is, has it been considered, or is it possible for, like, at the middle school and the high school, for kids to be able to view classes like live as they're happening? Like, I know other schools have done that. So, like, when Mr. Moulter is teaching math to his 7th graders, that the kids at home could be watching that math lesson live. Is that like absolutely impossible thing to do, or has it been considered, or what could it be considered? And I've heard that a couple times. Not necessarily my opinion, but just something I've heard.
And I can let Principal Graff and Principal Engeldinger chime in on this, but I believe that some of that is happening on certain occasions, but I think in having an expectation that a student is going to be engaged for 6 hours a day just watching their class interact online would be...
That is the interesting thing, is because some people really want that, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, how can that ever happen? So, but I was just wondering if it had been considered.
Yeah, not to usurp our principals who know what's going on, but it's my understanding that the way the model is built is that the A kids see their teacher live in person on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then the B students have their in-person time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if the A kids watch the B kids, it's the same lesson that they had the day before. They're not necessarily learning completely different stuff, are they?
Yes, they may be. But they're just engaging in it in a different way. And it really depends on the class, on the material, on where they are. You know, if it's a chemistry lab, then they're going to watch the same chemistry lab that they're going to do the next day. If it's, you know, interacting with a story in literature, they might be doing a different activity online. But I'll let Principal Graff and Engeldinger jump in here too.
For the middle school, you know, just some things that I'm thinking about, just to echo what Mr. Gronseth and Mr. Leonard talked about. Having a student from home plug in for 6 hours a day is a concern with the engagement factor. That's one of the reasons that we haven't moved to that model. And then the other thing, like Mr. Leonard said, most of our classes are A day, B day, kind of a repeat of that same lesson, because then when kids go home, they're practicing that skill. So the students who are at home would essentially see that same lesson. The consideration would be for those distance learning only students, and how do we bring them back into the classroom more. So that's definitely something to consider and something that we're thinking through.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Mr. Graff just said, and also add, there are times that your students might be asked to engage creatively with technology on their at-home day and still participate with their class. An example would be in our high school speech class, the teacher asks kids to give their class speeches from home so that they can be unmasked to the rest of the class that's actually sitting in the classroom. So there are days that they will be asked to engage synchronously. However, that is kind of few and far between for the reasons that both Mr. Graff and Mr. Gronseth talked about.
I appreciate that explanation. Gives me something to say. And my other question is, so we talked about that the 3-week downward trend, and then it sounds like we'd have to submit something and then they have to approve this. So what kind of timeline are we looking at then? Are we gonna like goof around with, not we, but like the system gonna bog that down for a week and now our numbers are going back up? Or you know what I mean? Like, what is the turnaround time?
The expectation is that we would notify them 24 hours before we were gonna change.
Okay.
So it's hasn't been very common that districts have been able to change, so I think that they're able to respond to those pretty much live time. And you know, we all have the commissioner's cell phone number and call her directly and say, here's where we are, here's what we're thinking, but they just want us to check in with them before we do that.
So there hasn't been a lot of schools that have switched models. They maybe just started in a different model than what we did to begin with. Is that kind of like a lot of people maybe started with their elementary in person right from the start?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I was under the impression in my mind that people were switching and we weren't. So that's...
And
Because
they're
I don't
not,
really follow what other schools do, so.
they're not so much concerned with districts who have had to go to more restrictive.
Yeah.
It's if you're going less restrictive, that's when you have to contact them.
Okay.
And I think from my perspective, I know we talked about this a lot too in August, but it's really disruptive to students and families to switch, and it's really also disruptive to our staff. So it's not that I don't want to go to a less restrictive model, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to switch back and forth. So personally, I'd want to see, 3 weeks of numbers, but then also looking at the state too, because if our county is an aberration, then I might feel like something else was coming our way, or that, that said, if our numbers, which I just looked, I think right now, pre-scrub, they're 21.9. If they were 31 and we're over the line and we're supposed to be all distance, I would resist that too, because we're close to the line, and I don't want to go to all distance and then 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later hop back into hybrid. So I know when we were talking in August, it felt like this was sustainable, and so far it has been. We haven't toggled, but I just don't want fellow board members or the public thinking that I just don't want kids back in school. I want to stick with the plan, even if our numbers go higher. That said, we may get to a point where we can't do that, but my resistance is to hopscotching back and forth.
And I too have heard some folks saying, well, if you could go back for a week, then go back for a week. But we've also completely refurnished our classrooms and our schools. And so if we're going to bring everybody back for a week, that means we have to move all the furniture as well. And we are very willing to do that. We are hoping to do that. But when we do it, we want to make sure that we're doing it for more than a week.
Yeah, and just, again, these are unofficial pre-scrubbed numbers but I was just looking, we have the 11th lowest number per 10,000 out of 87 counties right now. So we are doing very good.
Yeah.
But there are 76 counties that are higher than us. So that worries me a little bit, because while I'm really happy we're doing a good job, we're also not magic. And so what potentially is out there in terms of the virus and the amount of spread, there are 21 counties that are in all distance. Now, I don't know what they're doing on the ground in those districts, but according to the guidelines, they are all distance, and there's only one district, I think it's Cook County, so congratulations Cook County, that is all in person. And then there are only 8 that are, including that one. So there are 7 other districts that are, oh no, excuse me, this isn't including them. So there are 8 other districts that are all in-person elementary. So there are 9 districts that are able to do in-person elementary at this time.
Again, I think, that biggest confusion being that the hybrid looks so different in different schools. And I think that is the big confusion, because it certainly was to me too, so.
And I appreciate our administrators continuing to try to look for ways to increase teacher time. I mean, I think we all know how valuable, research also, that teacher time matters. And, I think the consideration of different options to try to make that happen is been a challenge, to say the least. And but I appreciate their efforts and their continued look at best practices going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I would add is that we're talking about the district as a whole. Mm-hmm. If your child needs something, please talk to their teacher. Please talk to the principal. If you feel like you haven't gotten the answers that you need, please talk to the superintendent. I'm not going to be very good at getting people what they need, but our school counselors, our teachers, our principals, and our superintendent are very good at getting people what they need, and we can make individual decisions based on IEPs and other things that get those kids more of what they need. At these meetings, we're at 30,000 feet. We're not looking at individuals, we're looking at total district.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
That's it.
Great. Any further discussion of that? All right, we'll move into building reports then, I guess. So principals, who let the dogs out?
We'll start with early childhood. Hopefully you can hear me all right. So we are definitely getting in the swing of things at early childhood. All of our classes are rolling and things are going quite well. We have been focusing on safety over the last 4 weeks. And so we've had bus safety. We've did things a little bit different this year. With bus and fire safety, we had the vehicles at our location, and in particular with fire safety, rather than having our firefighter there with us. We had a teacher who did some videotaping of the firefighter talking about safety in all areas of fire safety, so teachers could watch that with their kids in the classroom rather than having kids out and about with firefighters. We gave Mr. Graff a little bit of a panic because while our fire truck was parked at the building, we had 2 fire drills scheduled. So everything was good, but we have been focusing on safety. And then this week we will be holding our first early childhood screening of the year. That will be this Thursday. We are, of course, following COVID protocols. We have fewer appointments. We're really paring that down, but we do want to get our screening in and are following the guidelines set by the Minnesota Department of Health and Education. So that's a little bit in early childhood.
All right, and just to keep things moving along, South 2 has been focusing on safety, bus safety, fire safety, and early childhood was so kind to share the videos from the fire station, excuse me, because we were not able to get there like we usually do. I just will focus just for a minute on a couple of professional development opportunities that our staff has been participating in. All of the certified staff members are participating in what's called Life's Journey, and it really is a self-reflection looking at race and implicit biases that we may have. So our certified staff has been participating in that. And all of our classified staff, we've been using the Friday time as an opportunity to really provide some professional development for them as well. And they all participated in an anti-racism training. It was a 6-hour training session, and that was all completed right before our board meeting. So those are a few things happening around the South.
Well, greetings from North Elementary School Board members, and not that we haven't been being safe, because we've done those same drills at North and PD, as Dorian was talking about. But I have some kind of 3 fun things to share about just kind of what students are doing over October here. The first one is I've shared before about our assemblies that we usually do. Obviously, we can't do those now because of requirements of small groups gathering. But our PBS team has really thought innovatively on how to bring everybody together in common messages. And they've been doing a weekly 15-minute skit, a video called Saints Center. And if you can envision Sports Center from ESPN, this would be the North Elementary version called Saints Center. And they have a couple of anchors each time, and it's usually a teacher or 2, or maybe a teacher and a para. I get to sit in as an anchor this week, so I'm super excited about that. But it's been a big hit. This last week, their focus was, what's it take to be an engaged distance learner? So they had a few of our distance-only learners through their screen. And the student, the 4th grader at home, talked about, how she sets up a desk and a space that's conducive to learning, and that's kind of defined, to get a good definition of like how to be engaged and complete tasks at home when you're distance learning. And that was a response to a bit of a pattern that we have some students that aren't getting engaged at the level that they should be when they're distance learning. So why not have students showcase what it looks like to be a good distance learner? So that's Saint Center. And then also I had a student come up to me near the beginning of the school, and they're like, Mr. Doherty, like, we are using a lot of plastic for our meals and wrappings and stuff like that. We should be recycling this. So we did some research and checked into a program called Trex Recycling. I believe Gustavus did it on their grounds last year. And Trex is a company that makes decking out of recycled plastics. So we are in competition with other schools in the Midwest, elementary schools in the Midwest, to see if we can gather up tons of plastic film to recycle. And then if we do beat these other schools, we get a Trex bench for our playground. So that's what we're working on right now. And the kids are bringing lots of plastic film, plastic bags, and all that fun stuff. And then also we've registered as a building for Kids Vote, since we got a big election cycle going on. So we've registered to be able to have our distance learners on November 3rd participate as a voter that we get a dashboard from to see how kids vote at the federal level and the state level, as well as ballot screening, casting boxes, and ballot boxes for students that are on site for November 3rd. So that's kind of fun too, because it meets a lot of social studies standards. That's a little bit of ongoing stuff at North for the month of October.
Things are going well at the middle school also. I'm really proud of our students and our staff for doing as well as everybody's doing during these times. If you remember, September was Preparedness Month at St. Peter Middle School, the P of Saints Pride. And in October, we focus on the R, which is respect. So students in their advisory classes will be spending a lot of time talking about respect, why it's important, how to earn it, and how to show it. If you also will remember, last year, the board approved a remodel of our media center to create eventually 3 new classroom spaces. Phase 1 of that project, which is one large classroom kind of in the back portion, was completed over MEA break, and today was the very first day that our STEM, our 5th grade STEM class, was able to have class in that new space. Mr. Tupence's STEM classes will be housed in that area for the foreseeable future. And as mentioned, that space will eventually be able to accommodate 3 total classrooms for our future growth. Lastly, I do want to just share a quick update for the Native American Parent Advisory Council, which I'm a part of here at St. Peter. On October 1st, the team submitted its application for Native American education aid through the Minnesota Department of Ed. We're still waiting to hear feedback on that application, but the team has 3 goals that they're hoping to fund with the aid. The first goal is increase Native American student voice. The second goal is increase teacher resources for teaching those Native American specific state standards. And the last one, the goal is to increase staff capacity through some professional development opportunities on culturally responsive teaching strategies. So hopefully in the next couple of months, I'm able to report back on where the state is at with that aid application.
Great, we have the pleasure of having Jordan Paula with us tonight, our activities director, and he's gonna fill everybody in on hopefully not all of the changes, because we'll be here all night, but the changes and additions and results of some of our fall activities.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So to start, we had obviously an adjusted fall schedule. The initial guidance, the plan from the high school league was to move volleyball and football to March, and then we would still run cross country, swimming, soccer in the fall. But as you're probably well aware, they voted to move those back. So what that did was allowed or caused some shuffling to be done. So we're kind of in that middle ground phase where we have some of those initial fall sports are winding down. Our cross country is done. Swimming has sections this week. Our girls soccer team is supposed to play at Southwest Christian tomorrow. We'll see if that happens with 8 inches of snow on the ground. And our boys team ended their season last week. So again, another change, there are no state tournaments so far this year. They voted to not run those in the fall. We'll see what the winter brings with that. But again, so the culminating event is the section tournament, and our teams are doing well so far. The girls are in the section semifinals tomorrow. But then again, we held our first football game last week against Marshall, which was great. We're still bound by the 250 person capacity. So we have some systems in place for that to limit that and allow an opportunity for visiting fans and our home fans to attend the game. Another big change that happened about 10 days ago that kind of caught everyone off guard was allowing spectators at indoor events. We kind of heard inklings that it was coming, but then it came and kind of caught everyone off guard. So we had to put something in place relatively quickly. And again, kind of the guidance with that is 2 spectators for every athlete involved. But then as you kind of flesh that out a little bit, that has implications for things like fine arts and other meetings within the school. So we're still working through details of that. Heading into the winter seasons, those have all been essentially delayed. So we will run our full winter slate, no cancellations or anything like that so far. But again, with an abbreviated schedule, just like we saw in the fall, with the hopes of having a normal spring. So we'll see what that brings, but because we lost the entire spring last year, we're trying to make that as long and as extensive as possible, given this new year. So a lot of our clubs are off and running. Our fine arts, our fall play they're rehearsing. We're working through some logistics with that. But again, with this new guidance, we're hoping we can do some sort of in-person performance in the school. But again, just working through navigating all of those changes. It's been fun to see kids getting involved, but now we're seeing the winter's transitioning, so outdoor sports are getting a little more cold. So, happy to answer any questions, but it's been exciting to see those kids out and about and doing those things.
Jordan, not to put you on the spot, but what was the result of the 9th grade C Squad football game today? Do you know?
We played. That's all that matters. I genuinely don't know.
I'll ask Henry when I get home. I'm relieved that you don't know the score of that, because you work too hard as it is. So.
Thanks for that update on our co-curriculars. We also have the usual high school stuff that goes on that makes the high school experience so special. A huge thank you to our student council, kids and advisors, Peggy Dimmick and Carmen Hansen. They're working to put together a homecoming of sorts for kids that will be just as engaging and hopefully fun for kids as it possibly can be. Our candidates were announced over the weekend, and it's extra fun for staff because we get to double down on dress-up days, 2 days in a row of pajama day. We really couldn't ask for more. And speaking of our student council, we do have, I know by this time in the year, we usually have our student council representatives already announced to the board. They just held their elections, and I'm happy to let you know that both Mia Hansen and Liz Mitchell will be representing the student council on the board as co-presidents of the other officers, Secretary Ella Gilbertson and Treasurer Vanessa Kruger. So congratulations to those kids for earning those leadership positions. And then I also just want to echo what Chair Leonard said to families about making sure that families are reaching out to school. In the survey results that have come back so far, this was a survey about the academic delivery of instruction and how that's going, and there were several questions in there about the social emotional well-being of kids, as well as simple maybe not so simple technology questions, and don't hesitate to reach out. We have people at school in position to help kids and families with anything we possibly can. So again, don't hesitate to reach out either to the front office, myself, our guidance counselors, or our technology people if there's anything that school could do to help. And then finally, thank you to our students. The high school kids who are there every other day on campus are doing an amazing job following our masking protocol and social distancing. And the longer that we keep that up, the longer we'll be able to, at a minimum, stay in the hybrid model. So thank you for your cooperation for that, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Superintendent Gronson.
All right, it's my turn. And it's always a pleasure to spend time with our administrative team and to hear them and their pride for our schools and our students. And I'm just so proud of everything that they're doing. And we are in week 6 of school already. And as it was mentioned earlier, we are seeking feedback. So we really encourage families to fill out the surveys and tell us how we've been doing. Thank you to those who have already done that. Our goal is really to support and engage our students in meaningful and rigorous learning, and the feedback that we receive from families will help us to continually improve on that. And I'll say it again too, please reach out with your feedback, but especially if your student is struggling either academically or socially, emotionally, we want to be there to help. And even if the school doesn't directly have the support available, we often have people who can put people in contact with community sources of support as well. And we'd also, speaking of support, we want to remind families to fill out the form for free or reduced price lunch services. We want everyone to have the support that they need, but it's also important to the school district as a whole, because some of our state and federal funding sources are also tied to the number of students who receive those services in our schools. Families, in addition to receiving free reduced price lunch services, also get support with co-curriculars and equipment for sports. And right now, I know that all of our students are receiving those free meals, but that funding is not guaranteed by the federal government. It's just until it's available until the funds run out. And we're not exactly sure when that will be. Right now, it's scheduled to be till December, but if the funds run out before then that program will cease to continue. And we don't want families caught off guard by that. So we encourage everyone to fill out that form, make sure that that's in place should the current funding be discontinued by the federal government. And then, so as you know, and as Jordan spoke about, there have been those changes. We really want to encourage people to be mindful of the signage that is at events that you're going to, and know that you need to have a pass to attend events, and just know that the preparedness plans for any events are also going to be on the website, so you can check in. And if you're wondering, oh boy, if I'm going to a football game, do I have to wear a mask, or when do I have to wear a mask, or what are they doing to keep us safe during this event? You can go on the website and see exactly the steps that are being taken. So our hope is to, at some point, return to all in-person learning. And our only hope of doing that is to control the spread of COVID-19 in our community. So we just ask everyone to be careful out there, be safe out there, and if you're having events or going to events, keep those safety precautions in mind. That being said, there have been some plans being developed for homecoming to be celebrated on October 30th. Go Saints. It certainly won't be the traditional homecoming that many people have become accustomed to, but there will be some fun events planned for students and for the community. More information will be coming out soon. as plans that meet our COVID-19 restrictions and guidance are still being planned and finalized, but that will be something that we can look forward to supporting our students in a safe and healthy manner. Right? I forget that they don't realize that I'm looking at them when I turn. I'm actually turning away from them when I do that. So anyway, that is my report for October.
Excellent. Board members, John, let's start with you.
I have nothing. I think we had a good discussion earlier, so thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you, everybody. I think in the future, I would like to hear from Mrs. Tammy Skinner too, to give us some input and an update. That's all.
Absolutely. Thank you. Drew?
Nope, thank you.
Nope.
Tracy?
No.
I just have a couple things. Chris and Tony, thank you so much for spending your evenings doing this. We sincerely appreciate it. We know that this is enough of a commitment usually, and it's more of a commitment these days. So thank you both. To students and faculty and parents, October is that time of year when seniors that are looking at college are sending in their applications. And I have a senior this year, and I know it's October 19th, but maybe there are other seniors who are like my senior who didn't really spend much of the first 18 days working on their applications. But the next couple of weeks will be really meaningful and really, I'm sure, stressful for those students who are thinking about where they're going to attend after St. Peter if they are making those plans. And I want to thank the counselors who I know are really busy right now, and teachers who are being asked to write letters. I know I said repeatedly to my son, you know, lots of other people are asking them for letters too, and that's not just something they can churn out in 5 minutes. And I know a lot of our teachers really do care, all of them care, but writing those letters does take time because of how much they care. And I realize on top of everything this year, that's a big ask. And I just want to thank everyone and say good luck to seniors, and excited to hear about your future plans as the year progresses. All right, with that, the next upcoming meeting of the school board is November 16th, and that will be at 6:30 here in the governor's room. And I would entertain a motion, I suspect we all would, to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.